Welcome back to the Monday Morning Point Guard podcast. On today's episode, going to be doing the eulogy for the Oklahoma City Thunder to the really surprise of no one. They have been eliminated from the playoffs and from play-in contention. So what did their season look like? What happened? And then also, what does their future look like moving forward into this offseason and beyond? If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to like it as well as subscribe for weekly content. Also, the podcasts are now up on Spotify, so you can listen to the full episode uninterrupted there. And if there's a spot you agree with, disagree with, either reach out to us on Twitter or in that comment section, and we'd love to discuss with you. Like most of the teams eliminated from the playoffs at this stage, the Oklahoma City Thunder entered this season with really no desire or designs on winning many games. They're really embracing their tank down the stretch of this season, and currently their injury report reads more like the intro to a Star Wars movie than an actual injury report, as long as it is. And just as an organization, since they traded Paul George and since Paul George demanded that trade, then the Thunder decide to move off of Russell Westbrook. This really hasn't been an organization that's been looking to compete, looking to win games. And I know that the Bubble Thunder made the playoffs as the fifth seed in the West, but that season was really a shock to most NBA fans. Most analysts and fans saw that as potentially the worst team in the league. And so it was really a surprise when they did as well as they did. And going into that season, in fact, there was a lot of speculation around whether Chris Paul would ever even suit up for that team. There was speculation that he would be traded like pretty much immediately, or they would just sit him out for the year until they could find a trade partner. But to Chris Paul's credit, he said, no, I'm going to play. And that actually ended up working out really perfectly for both sides. Going into that season, Chris Paul was not seen as an asset. He was seen as an aging player who was often hurt on a bad contract. And when they were looking to trade him, even before the season started, there was really no trade market for him. But since he had such a great year, they were really able to capitalize on his value when they ended up flipping him to the Suns. So just to go rewind and go back in time. So before they make the Russell Westbrook trade, they trade Paul George to the Clippers for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Clippers first round picks in 22, 24, and 26. They get swaps from the Clippers in 23 and 25. Then they also get the Miami Heat first round pick from 2021, which ends up being used to select Trey Mann, and then 2023. After that, because without Paul George and with kind of reloading with picks and a young, unproven guard in Shai, who had shown some flashes even in his rookie year, they end up deciding to move off of Russell Westbrook as well. And they do a Russell Westbrook for CP3 swap, but also the Thunder get back first round picks in 24 and 26, and then swaps in 21 and 25. So two picks and two swaps in the first round to move off of Russell Westbrook and add Chris Paul to your team. That sounds crazy today, but back then it wasn't as if Chris Paul was seen as an asset. And isn't it just crazy that Russell Westbrook was seen as a much better asset than Chris Paul, like just a couple of years ago? And fast forward to today, and you couldn't give Russell Westbrook away if you tried. After that playoff run from the Thunder in the bubble, they end up flipping Chris Paul that offseason into what amounts to basically just a salary dump and then also a 2022 first. So for those keeping score at home here, Sam Presti turned the core of a potential second round playoff team that wasn't even really a given to make it out of the first round, the core of that team, into a really special young guard in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's been really the face of the franchise here for the last two seasons, but also they get 8 first round picks and 4 pick swaps. That's really not bad considering just overnight Paul George demands a trade and wants out, and they were just put in a really tough situation that they weren't accounting for. Going into that offseason, they were really focused on kind of retooling around Paul George and Russell Westbrook, but then Paul George just kind of puts a torpedo in that situation. So, but because the Clippers were kind of put over a barrel by Kawhi Leonard, he said he was only going to sign there if they were able to trade for Paul George. Sam Presti was able to kind of get the house back in that deal. And since they kind of moved off of that Russell Westbrook and Paul George core, Sam Presti has been over here hoarding future draft picks like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Over the next 5 years, the Thunder have 36 draft picks. That's an entire draft plus 6 picks. Or you could fill out 2 full NBA teams and still have picks left over. Now, it's not just a bunch of second-round picks. They have 19 firsts. You heard me. 19 first-round picks over the next 5 seasons. And when you combine that with the fact that they've got players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a guy I view as a future all-star and a potential all-NBA candidate at only 23 years old, and then in last year's draft, you add rookie triple-double machine Josh Giddey, who's only 19. Their backcourt is set here for the next decade. They've also got perimeter lockdown defender and much improved on the scoring end in a player in Lou Dort, who's only 22. The Oklahoma City cupboards are as well stocked going forward as just about any team we've ever seen. And obviously, the Thunder can't use all 36 of these draft picks or even all of the 19 first-round picks that they have, but it's still going to help them even if they can't make all of those selections. Oklahoma City could theoretically put together the best draft package by far out of any team for the next disgruntled star player. And then also come draft time, if they want to move up in the draft, they can easily do that as well. Now, it sounds like the perfect situation for them to be in, the perfect situation to rebuild a team, but I really think it looks better on paper than it does in reality, and here's why. Obviously, first and foremost, you really have to nail the draft picks, and the draft is always pretty scary and uncertain to kind of pin your hopes on, but this isn't as big of a concern for me. Sam Presti has always done a really good job finding value and finding guys in the draft and just generally making good selections. So I'm not as concerned about that aspect of it. But in terms of the ambitions of trading for a potential star player, the way things go in today's league, a star player is able to pretty much dictate where they end up. They give a list of preferred destinations, and it's typically their top choice that they end up getting moved on to. So it's unlikely that Oklahoma City is going to show up as someone's top preferred destination. And then in terms of the reasoning that star players choose the destinations that they do, if it's not a major market team like the Knicks or the Lakers, it's either going to be a team that has a history of winning tradition that has shown themselves to be extremely competent over years and over time, or it's a situation where they're going to be paired with another star player. Sure, Oklahoma City has a potential future star and a star in the making in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but his potential as a player is never going to be the gravitational type star like Kevin Durant or LeBron or Steph Curry. I just don't see him being the type of guy that players are just going to be clamoring and fighting to get to be paired up with. And then as far as the Oklahoma City tradition goes, as far as a winning tradition goes, it's not as if they've been historically inept like the Sacramento Kings or even the Wolves this year withstanding, but it's still a relatively new franchise. And I know that previously it was the Sonics, but I don't think that players view that as counting for Oklahoma City, and I don't think it should count for this infrastructure that they have currently. And just in general, they're several years removed from really their heyday or like their winning days, their real true competing days. They just don't have an established winning tradition like a team like the Spurs do, for an example of a small market team. And we've seen the Spurs show up as a preferred destination for a couple of star players. In regards to potentially moving up in the draft, it also looks better on paper than it does in reality. Let's just create a fictional world where the next Zion or LeBron, Anthony Davis, a guy like that enters the draft, a consensus number one pick, and someone who is going to be viewed as the next generation defining star. Also, for this argument, let's say Oklahoma City doesn't win the lottery, but they're still pretty high up on the board. Maybe they have the 4th pick, the 3rd pick, something like that. There's going to be no chance that a team moves down in the draft to allow Oklahoma City to make that pick. Nobody is going to move off a potential face of their franchise or a potential generation defining star. Nobody's going to move back in that draft. And I know we had the Markelle Fultz, Jason Tatum swap, and Fultz was viewed as the number one pick, but I don't think he was viewed even at the time as much more of an asset than Jason Tatum. And it's kind of played out that way. It wasn't a case of like when LeBron entered the league, it was clear he was the number one pick, and there would have been basically nothing you could have traded to get Cleveland to move off of that pick. This isn't NBA 2K. You can't just barrage another GM with a bunch of draft picks and just keep adding picks to the deal until the computer accepts. We don't live in that world. So if there's a real top player that can be seen as a historically great player, a team's just not going to move back in the draft just because you throw in a bunch of draft picks. We've already seen that kind of play out. Oklahoma City desperately wanted to move out of the 6th spot in this past year's draft and into the top spot to take Cade Cunningham, but Detroit was not remotely interested in doing that. And then Oklahoma City tempered their expectations and just wanted to get into the top 3 to take. It was a 3-person draft this year, not to say that the other players haven't been really good, because they have, but at the time it was clear that this was it was 3 really good players, and then there was a little bit of a drop off. None of the teams in the top 3 wanted to move out of that pick. Now, obviously, with more picks in the lottery, you get more bites at the apple or rolls of the dice, but in terms of just winning the lottery. But I really feel the ability to potentially trade for a star player or move up in the draft to draft a potential star player looks a lot better on paper than it does in reality. Looking ahead for the Thunder this offseason, they obviously have a really good chance at grabbing a top 3 pick, and any of the guys in the top 3 of this draft are going to be extremely good fits for them. For the Thunder, the backcourt is totally set up for them, so there's no need to draft another guard. And even with a guy like Lou Dort, who's not really playing guard for them, he's still a little bit undersized as far as a wing goes. So a player like Jaden Ivey just isn't going to make a ton of sense for them. That might be a situation where they want to trade down and add back some more future picks or young assets, maybe a vet, something like that. That might be a situation where we see them want to trade down. But if they end up feeling that Ivey is just head and shoulders better than any of the players behind him in the draft, I think they should just go ahead and make the pick. They desperately need talent here. So if they feel like Ivey is just much better than anyone else that they're going to be able to grab in the draft in the situation that they fall out of the top 3, I think you just take best player available. Beyond that, though, I think Jalen Duren is actually a guy that they should target in the situation that they end up slipping in the draft. With Giddey and Shea running the show as the playmakers of this team, giving them an ultra athletic lob threat and a pick and roll partner is really going to go a long way. Free agency wise, the Thunder may not have a ton of open roster spots this offseason. When I was looking at it, it looks like most of the guys from this year's team are under contract for next season as well. Sure, you have guys like Derek Favors, but even with him, like, he could become a free agent, but he's got a $10 million player option. I'm pretty sure he's going to go ahead and take that. And then also you have Mike Muscala. He's a guy on a team option. You can let him walk, bring him back. I don't really care. I would lean towards just letting him walk just to clear up a roster spot. And for the Thunder, they do have a ton of cap room, so they can splurge a little bit in free agency. And for them, I think it's important that they start winning some games, or at least get this thing moving in the right direction so that they can avoid developing a real losing culture. And I'm not saying that they should go out and sign Bradley Beal or James Harden, some of these big name free agents, because they just aren't ready to start competing for titles. And that's setting aside the fact that I doubt that any of those guys are going to want to sign there, even if Oklahoma City wanted to make them an offer. But I think bringing in some veterans who can help you win some games next season is going to be a really good bet for them. And somebody like Jusuf Nurkic, that could be a really good center option for them. Or maybe even someone like Montrezl Harrell. He could be a fun target for Giddey and Shea. If they wanted to move in the direction where they want to improve the team but still keep up with the youth movement here, they could try and prime Mitchell Robinson away from the Knicks. The Knicks don't seem that sold on keeping him, and I think he could be a really good center option for them. Or if they want to go on the more risky side, they could make an offer on Mo Bamba. Guard wise, I really think that they're fine. And as far as wings go, there just really aren't too many under the radar, undervalued wing players that are going to be realistic for the Thunder to get. Sure, I think they should kick the tires on getting Miles Bridges, but I think the Hornets are going to match any offer that he gets. And just as a general direction of this team, I really don't think that continuing to tank for very much longer is the move here. If they want to roll it out with another potential 20-win team again next season, that's fine. But I think that should absolutely be the last year that they're doing this. I'm not even sold that it's a good option for next season. But if they do want to do it, fine, whatever. Just it has to be the last season. How much longer is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander going to be happy to lose games and get shut down the stretch of a season because he's helping them win too much? If he asks out and you end up trading him for more draft picks or more unproven young assets, you're just pushing this timetable for you to be competitive back even further. And just in general, I don't think it's good for the culture of a team and an organization or the future development of the guys currently on the roster to be in a situation where year after year you aren't competing for anything and you're almost encouraged to lose games. The Thunder have enough draft picks from other teams that they're going to be able to continue to add young assets, even if they're a really good team. With the Clippers getting older and having trouble getting Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on the court at the same time for any amount of time, some of those Clippers picks could be really good. Also, Houston appears to be years away from being a competitive team, and they're just kind of entering their rebuilding process. So some of those Houston picks that they got for the Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook swap could be really great. They just don't need to continue to submarine. They can start getting things going in the right direction, and within a few years really start competing, and they're still going to be able to add top talent in the draft or be in a position to trade some of those top picks for win-now veterans. Just in general, both this year and last year's team have found ways to win way more games than was expected of them, to the point where the organization has to shut down players like Shai and Al Horford last season because they were helping them win too many games down the stretch. That just screams to me that this team is ready to take the next step. And while I don't think that this offseason is going to be the one where the Thunder need to push all the chips in and start competing for titles right away, I think it is time for them to start winning some more games and maybe just target the play-in. Maybe just look to get the play-in to the play-in next season. They have a plethora of young assets and draft assets, so they are set up really well to capture the best of both worlds. A competitive young team with high draft picks moving forward.